Important notice: the following content may be triggering. Viewer discretion is advised. All discussions are based on personal opinions and experiences. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to a local support organization. Important notice.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm your host, Tara Woodlee, and we're here to talk about issues that survivors care about and raise awareness and take a deep dive into how we, society, can join in and be a part to be and represent a culture of taking action. So, today's topic, we're going to be talking about how abuse doesn't just leave scars, right? It alters every part of your life, from your sense of identity to the way you interact with the world. And the effects can be very overwhelming. Even long after you've left the situation. But what happens when survivors step in front of a camera, not as victims, but as powerful narrators of their own truth? So today we're going to do something special. We're talking about a groundbreaking documentary that is shaking up the way the world sees domestic violence. It's called Scars Unseen. And we're honored to be joined by the brilliant mind behind the film, Meredith Yinger. And along with one of her other colleagues, and a courageous woman here, Adrienne. And this isn't just a film, it's a raw, unfiltered look at survival, truth telling, and an emotional journey of reclaiming your voice. So we'll explore what it really takes to share your story on camera and the hidden realities survivors still face, and why this film could be the shift we've all been waiting for. But before we dive in, I do have to promote our affiliate, Opus Clip. Opus Clips have made a big difference in the way we podcast and how our podcast team does things. You can take long content like this and turn it into viral short content videos. And Opus Clip is just very vital here. We love it. It uses AI to instantly pull those short form clips, and it just makes it so incredibly easy. So if you would like to help support Break the Silence, and just use the link that's scrolling across the bottom and in the descriptions, and sign up for Opus Clip today and helping with our mission. So now let's get into our conversation here and introduce our guest. So welcome, ladies. We are so grateful to have you. First is Adrienne Rouan, right? Joining us. She is a certified trauma support specialist, a somatic experience trauma practitioner, and TEDx speaker whose personal journey through trauma has shaped her powerful work in helping others heal. After enduring a difficult childhood, domestic violence, and chronic illness, PTSD, Adrienne transformed her pain into purpose by developing a life changing program for survivors, combining strategic planning with trauma recovery tools. Adrienne now works internationally, empowering others through coaching and advocacy and mental health training. And we're so honored to have her on our show. And we also have Meredith Yinger. We're excited to welcome back Telly Award winning director, documentarian Meredith Yinger, the founder of She TV, and the creative force behind the powerful documentary series Scars Unseen. Meredith is known for telling raw, real, and often untold stories, especially of those that center around women's voices and their experiences. Her work has been recognized at the Cannes Indies, I'm sorry, got tongue-tied, Venice the Venice Shorts and Women's Filmmakers of Indies Fest, and Scars Unseen is already making waves in educational spaces nationwide. Meredith is not only a filmmaker, she's a fierce advocate for change, and we're honored to have you both here for our conversation today, ladies. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm excited to be here and talking with you and Adrienne. So, thank you for giving us a platform to share more about this project that has taken up a lot of our lives now.
Oh, I completely understand because I know at one point they were doing a documentary on my daughter's story, and of course it didn't get finished. But I know how much time and effort that took out of our lives, and I just God bless you for that work you're doing because it's a lot. I know it's a lot. So let's just get started. This question I kind of want to ask is, what does it really mean to relive your trauma for the world to witness, right? And how do you prepare for that kind of vulnerability? Um, Meredith, did you want to start?
Yeah, I feel like I would definitely direct this to Adrian though, since
Adrian, yeah.
the process, and what we asked of Adrian, and even in participating in these types of events after the filming, it is a lot to ask. And I'm forever grateful that Adrian wants to come alongside me and continue to share the incredible work that she is doing, because like it's this fine line, right, of trying to talk about trauma and trying to impact change and help us all be more trauma informed at the same time as not trying to re-traumatize people. So it is a very fine, and I'm very cognizant of what I'm asking of Adrienne too a lot of times. So I'm just grateful that she is in a place and wants to share. But from her perspective, I'd love to hear from her side.
Yes. So, Adrian, we would love to hear that from you, and then maybe Meredith back on how she helped you with that through this process.
Yes, and Tara, thank you so much. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you all for what you do in our world, and again, also for giving us this platform. And absolutely, definitely want to throw the ball back to Meredith after this because she did a lot of work to help me feel safe. So I think the first step really to be able to get on a camera, knowing, I think knowing the first part is that you must accept that you're not going to most likely share this story without having what we would call nervous system activation in my world of expertise. So, trauma trigger is a common word that you'll hear. So, I think the first step again is acknowledging I'm probably going to be triggered. And I love Brene Brown's work, and she talks about vulnerability and accepting that to be vulnerable is to be courageous,
Mhm.
that rewriting that narrative, right, to open your heart and to open your soul to people is to know that you are being courageous. And I think that helps alleviate some of the fear. So
Mhm.
combining those knowings that I'm going to be triggered, but that to show what it really looks like
Yeah.
is the point,
Mhm.
because it's so often misconstrued as people being difficult, or especially women, you're being difficult, you're just overreacting. And it's not an overreaction. It's a completely physiologically, biologically natural reaction to speaking about what you lived through. So
Right.
to me, that's why I teach what I teach and why I practice somatic experiencing, because it allows us to maintain what we would call the witness on board while we tell the story. It's a knowing that I'm feeling my physical presence while intentionally sharing a story that I know is going to trigger me and that I know I can make it through because of the tools I have, and also choosing safe spaces to do it and matching your vulnerability level to who you're sharing with.
No,
So,
absolutely. That's critical for anybody, but let alone if you're going to make your story so public, to have those kinds of people supporting you in the background. So, um,
Yeah.
Meredith, did you want to talk a little bit about um, how you went about helping in that manner?
Yeah, I definitely throughout this entire process I've tried to create, like Adrienne said, just a relationship, but also like a safe space where back 5 years ago or when we did the interview, in and of itself, like just kind of creating not only like a crew that's supportive, which I do think is very important, and I did try to be very selective as to who was on set, how many people were on set. I talked to everyone before filming, saying going to be things that are said that might make you uncomfortable. For some people, this might be triggering, like, and make sure that they knew what they were also going into, because I think that's important. And you don't think about people behind the camera so much being affected, necessarily. But I think that that was really important to try and keep it minimal, keep it small, make sure that it was sort of like a safe space. And then also telling Adrienne and Trish and Maha, like, please only tell me what you want to tell me. This is your story. I do not by any means want to push, pull, nothing. Like, this is your story. So if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, we're not answering it. We're moving on. No, no harm, no foul. And just really kind of keep that open dialogue, I felt like, is what I was really trying to do, to make sure, like, because often things come up, right? Or something changes, or like Adrienne was saying, in the film, like, we do showcase Adrienne having a physical reaction, because of the triggers to her. And I also felt like including that tiny portion in the film was important to showcase that, like, these are real reactions. These are real things that happen to people. And we never see the nitty gritty in between process, right? It's always the pretty before and after. And I thought it was really important to showcase it, not only like Adrienne's strength, but just like how she was able to communicate what was happening to her for people that might not know. Like, I didn't know exactly what was happening. I knew, she was having a reaction, and I was like, do you want to stop? What can we do? Can we get you water? Like, just kind of having that. And then Adrienne was able to walk me through what was physically happening to her. And I felt for the audience, that's also very important, because you think of PTSD, or you think of things coming out in only one way. And I just think it's so different for everyone. But it's so beautiful as well, because like Adrienne mentions, like, it allowed, like, the training and things that she had, and the techniques, she was able to keep going through the interview. And we went on for, I think, like an hour or so after that, like, in filming and in talking about Adrienne's story. So I felt like that was really important to showcase, in the film. And hopefully people watching can either resonate or just have that understanding and awareness that this is what it can look like. um, and then same thing in moving forward. I want, all of those involved to, if they come to a screening or anything like that, like, to not have to rewatch the film, to not have to, relive as much as possible. Only do what you feel comfortable with, because it is a challenge. And even myself personally, after doing this type of work, I notice I can be affected as well, and get really, sad or upset, and have to relive alongside these people who I love. So I think just being cognizant of that and trying to incorporate, care through the entire process, and just really like communicate with Adrienne, like, check in, like, how are we doing, what's going on, where are you at, and here's where I'm at also. And I think as a filmmaker, you have a responsibility to do that. And I really would encourage, like, anyone who is tackling subjects like this to really be trauma informed, or as much as possible, like, make sure that you take it seriously and understand that these are people. Um, these are real lives, behind these documentaries and behind these stories, even if it's a based on story that was someone's life. And I think that the repercussions of that are oftentimes very negative, and the people involved aren't always thought of first. um, and I just think throughout Scars Unseen, I really want them to feel part of it, but also like that they not are required to do anything, or you know
Right.
do more than they want to do, and just to showcase their stories in and of itself is so powerful and empowering and inspiring, and that's kind of been the feedback we've gotten too, which has been awesome.
Wonderful. I think the main thing like our listeners definitely would want is just a little bit, not to give too much of Scars Unseen away, but just a little bit of your story, Adrienne, enough to like give them a feel. And then how did you and Meredith come about going into the project from there?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, Tara. Well, I'll tell how we met first. It was a
Okay.
very universal God intervention. It was not, there's no other way to explain it.
Mhm.
I was actually pretty deep into about a year into my journey through somatic experiencing myself and just realizing the power of this type of healing. And I also had begun learning about neurology of trauma and what
Mhm.
PTSD really was.
Right.
And in somatic experiencing, we learn, again, as I mentioned earlier, something called keeping your witness on board. So, I like to think of it as your soul self that has been put into this mammal body. You kind of keep your soul self available and watching and caring for your physical self in a way. That's how I like to explain it. And I had started just being I was on my own for really one of the first times in my life for a long period of time without a partner, and I had when life started shifting, I had a massive breakup, and I was determined that I was going to become well and leave that cycle of abuse because no matter what I ended up in, and I hadn't had a lot of relationships, but each one of them had a very unhealthy aspect to them.
Mhm.
And so I was determined to become well. And I was living on my own for the first time. I grew up in a home where we were homeschooled,
Mhm.
and I attended a small 30 student, very conservative religious school for about a year and a half when my little brother was seriously ill. And throughout my childhood, there was just always something happening to one of us. We had some birth defects and surgeries and just many, many situations happening that were besides the domestic abuse in the home. So there was never true peace. And then I brought that, of course, into the relationship. I met someone when I was 16 who was much, much older. That's the ex-husband. In fact, it's hard to say ex-husband now. In my journey of healing, I don't. He was not a husband. He was an abusive person,
Mhm.
and extremely abusive with a history of convictions and that type of abuse.
Right.
So extremely, extremely abusive. But to me, leaving home and being groomed in that way was it was a safety net. So I fell into that safety net. I thought of it as, and then out of the out of the frying pan into the raging bonfire. So that had gone on. And I had been trying to claw my way out of that. And I say claw because, as we know, especially back in the late 2000s and early teens, it still wasn't domestic violence still wasn't acknowledged very well, and it was
Right.
not supported by
Mm-mm.
our police or our courts. And in fact, I was vilified by the guardian ad litem of my daughter and told that I was a vicious ex-wife trying to sabotage him in spite of his criminal convictions for harming a child in the past.
Mhm.
So I mean, it was insane, and my daughter was harmed and by him, and it was just so debilitating, and it created such instability that I ended up collapsing and almost took my life. I had a spiritual intervention. I was not. I would have done it if I hadn't had a spiritual intervention.
Right.
So I credit, universe, God for saving my life and helping me to realize that there was something out there. So I made a phone call and found a trauma informed center through a hospital system in Ohio that was exploring what it would be like to have holistic care for mental health. And that changed my life. That started it. I got into the body work of actually trauma releasing exercises first and did
Mhm.
that for about a year, found somatic experiencing, and then I was so excited. I'm a pretty passionate person. So when I realized this can change everything, the triggers can start to diminish. You
Yes.
lose the sensation of shame and you change the story to be powerful instead of victim based. And a lot of times that's what I would do. I would have like go to my bosses to try to be saved. I wanted to be saved. I wanted to be helped. Even the courts, you go there hoping to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found out was that when you go to people hoping to be helped, neurologically, physiologically, there is a subconscious reaction and behavior that comes from that, where they kind of come over you as an authority figure versus meeting you peer to peer. And I realized as I learned to lose shame and to come to people peer to peer, you're treated completely differently. And when you tell
Absolutely.
your when you tell your
Yeah.
story from that perspective of, yeah, look what I overcame. Of course, I'm having a trauma response. I should be having a trauma response. And I'm paying you to support me through this, not to judge me or shame me through this. People react utterly differently to you. And so that was when I made a phone call. I was watching a completely unrelated documentary. And at the end, I was like, oh, I want to watch the next iteration of this. And it said, go to indiefilms.com. And the letters that started the film were ST. So I was scrolling and scrolling, trying to find that. And Scars Unseen just caught my peripheral vision as I scrolled. And I scrolled back up and I clicked on it and I watched the trailer. And then a few weeks later, I signed up for the newsletter. And I think I donated just like all that I could, which wasn't very much at the time.
Right.
And I signed up for the newsletter, and then they put out a call that they wanted to hear more stories. So I thought, well, what the heck? I want to share. And I liked that it wasn't just about telling some horror story.
Right.
It wasn't about showcasing some poor person who had this terrible experience and let's all feel sorry for them and, show the ugliness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it was about a balance. It was about what happened to you and then what. And so I called, and that's how we met.
Yes, and Meredith, I think that's so wonderful because, like I said, we did have a documentary team tried to do my daughter's story, and that fell through. But then we ended up with a ID Discovery Channel picked it up from one of their episodes, and the key thing that I walked away with is, as a national speaker, I personally love to include the after. What happened after all that went on with my daughter's death, and what we went through and where God led me. And there is some powerful things in my story that avenue, the ID channel and everything did not show how powerful God, for me personally, led me into this powerful union with Him in order to save lives, and that there is like even joy to be found, even in places where you do not think you'll find joy again. So I applaud that you have focused on that, Meredith. That's what appealed to me about it so much. I have to say thank you that you handle it that way because I love that. So tell
Thank
me more about that, Meredith.
Yeah, well, thank you first off for saying that. I think like you and Adrienne are just like testaments to why we need more stories like this that do showcase the after and the process. Because if you look at our media and documentaries and current, options of content around this issue, it really does focus on the gory details. It focuses on people being stuck and stagnant and remaining in these situations. And I think as a society, we need the positive, we need the hopeful aspect, and we need the, like you're saying, like turning points and change, right? Because that's how conversations get started. That's how hope can inspire people. Like hope is a huge motivator, right? Like we all need more hope, but I really just do believe that very strongly that it's so important to showcase these stories of hope, of healing, of empowerment, that you can change your narrative, that it is possible. Look at how these women have done it, and like maybe it looks different for you, but you can also do that. And I really hope that I really hope that we're in that sort of phase, in media and in the content out there, because stories and movies change the world, right? Like it can dictate your view on an issue like that. You can remember or have something stick with you for your entire life, based off of what we're seeing and what we're consuming, and the types of content. And like, why not use that media and that platform for positive change? Um,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that to me is just so inspirational, and it's very lacking. People want to see the sensationalized versions of what happened, but at the same time, they cut
mhm,
out the real, like, aftermath. And especially if, for me, I think it's detrimental not to show where sometimes aftermath can lead to something that can change the world and perspectives, and help people to cope with their trauma. Because I'll say I'm not anything special. I'm not like some high tech movie star or something like that. I am an everyday mother. I am an everyday survivor. And I know, Adrienne, you feel the same. And I just have a dynamic in the background of, I didn't quit, and part of that's just my nature, I know. But if I can find in my journey healing and hope and love, and share my heart and begin anew all over again, anybody can do it. Anybody literally can do it. So I think that kind of storytelling is powerful beyond belief. So I applaud both you ladies for doing that. We're going to take a break real quick. We're going to share a word real quick about our store. If you don't know, the Break the Silence does have a store where you can get merchandise. You can even get Through the Eyes of Survivors merchandise there, and everything that is purchased there goes to to support our survivor programs. So stay with us, and we'll come right back with Meredith and Adrienne and talk some more. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. We wanted to pause for a moment and let you know that Through the Eyes of Survivors has a shop now open. And this is a great way for you to not only help survivors of domestic violence, but also let everyone know that you will not be silent about this important cause. From t-shirts to bags to coffee mugs, we have so much to choose from. To grab your swag, head to our store at breakthesilencedv.org. That's store.breakthesilencedv.org. We can't say enough about how much we appreciate all that the community does to help support us and this organization. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode and continue to subscribe to future episodes. Thank you. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Through. All right, we're back with Meredith of She TV Media and Adrienne. So we were talking some definitely about how different the storytelling is here. So let's talk just a little bit more about that, the dynamics of how storytelling in film can shift the way society itself responds to survivors of abuse. So, Adrienne, in telling your story, have you seen a different shift by doing this project with Meredith?
Definitely. I think that I see it in small scale, obviously, because if you watch mainstream news, we see that it feels like the world's falling apart some days. And
Mhm.
it's interesting, you mentioned earlier something about people want to see the darker side, the nitty gritty. They do, but it's interesting because it's more of a subconscious yearning, right? We are actually seeking the adrenaline rush of watching something that triggers deep emotion,
Mhm.
and we project our own beliefs and anger, especially, onto what we're seeing. So that's perpetuating. Nervous systems are extremely contagious, And when we're watching something that is salacious, it's triggering whatever in us hasn't accepted or is afraid of in that regard. So I think that when we're telling the story in a different way, we're showing that even, my story could be considered salacious. I do try to avoid trigger words. However, part of this journey is learning how to face what has happened in a graceful way, and also learning to overcome any behaviors we've had in the past that were shameful in society's view. And with PTSD, I can tell you, I have, they call people Karens a lot in this culture when you see someone upset and having a literal trauma response. But we look at it like that person is consciously deciding, oh, I'm going to scream at somebody today because that sounds like a great idea. But it's not. That's not what we're doing. We're compromising our dignity involuntarily with a physiological response that happens in 1/5 of a second in your brain. A formed thought takes 1 to 3 seconds. If you have a shredded nervous system, you're going to behave in ways that compromise your dignity. And when you start to understand that, and when we tell the story, and we mention this a bit in the film just about the physiological responses and the body work, it's essential for people to start understanding we're not just walking around in our conscious mind all day long making choices, especially when you've survived domestic violence, especially in a world that loves to shame and blame anything that doesn't look and feel polished and professional, even though we actually don't enjoy that. I mean, who wants to sit in a room with someone in a suit who is acting? I sure don't like that anymore. And it was triggering to me to be treated in a way that was surface and superficial. And so that was when I left corporate, because it was no longer serving me, but I was also I think we need to understand we break more after than we necessarily do during.
Right.
Once it's all over and your body takes a big sigh of relief and you've gotten safe, that's when your body, the cortisol levels go down and your body starts to fall apart, essentially. And that's why we have so many women, especially after domestic violence. Something like 75% of women after domestic violence end up with a chronic illness. That is biologically and physiologically normal, but that's not how it's treated. And then we feel bad. So telling this story from this very different perspective, even with the autoimmune conditions and chronic illness, it's like, okay, well, here it is. This is what happens after you've survived. And as you mentioned earlier, Tara, I'm just a normal person too. I come from a trailer park in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. And when you come up with less resources, you do have to claw and fight your way through something. And that then is often missed. It's like we just overcame it. We didn't just overcome it. We're a normal person who chose to have grit. And I used to say, even if I have to crawl across my daughter's 18th birthday, she's going to make it okay. It doesn't have to look pretty. And the less we tell the story in a way that acts like it's supposed to be a pretty ending tied up in a bow, I think the better we'll heal, because we don't heal well when we're striving for some perfect, beautiful ending in a bow. And I mean, Maha and I both are pretty open about our struggles, which are directly related to what we've survived. The way our bodies have manifested the trauma. And it's imperative that the story be told in a way that also doesn't victimize us, because we are still strong. We are still making impacts. We do have bad days, and then we rest, and then we come back, and then we do it again, or we try something different. And that's what I think is the most important takeaway for anyone starting out on the journey. Once you've made it out and you're still okay, that's where it actually gets harder. And I think that's important to acknowledge. Mentally, emotionally harder, because when you're running on adrenaline, that is made to help you make it through. You can survive, you can be mama bear, you can do whatever needs done, and then after, you're like, what now? And your body is like, what just happened to us?
Oh no, yeah, I've been definitely have experienced that. And I had to learn that it was okay not to be okay. It was okay for a day if I needed to take a day and go to bed and just not deal. But put the mindset in my head of, okay, I'm gonna wake up the next day and that's a new day. And that day has its a new challenge. So get up out of the bed, kind of thing. Don't stay
Yeah,
there. And
absolutely.
so that was definitely an experience for me. But Meredith, on your end,
Mm.
um, what kind of societal change are you hoping for or have you seen in doing this kind of documentary work?
Yeah, well, I know that I know that we couldn't accomplish everything in this film. I'm also just a normal person. I wanted to at least, if nothing else, provide, like Adrienne is saying, the motion, the coming back, the trying again, the showing up for yourself. And like visually, we Adrienne had this beautiful representation of trauma and the wave and spilling it out. And I really leaned into the visual of the wave, not only to symbolize like the cycle of abuse, but also just the force that these women are and the process afterwards and the healing from trauma and the ferocity that it takes. And right, like the ocean is the giver of life, and the takes it away as well, right? Like it is just that big powerful thing, and I think that also exists inside all of us. And like, what does that look like for each person, um from a trauma standpoint? And I know that this film, even in the screenings and festivals that we've gone to, it has at least enabled people to see domestic violence intersected with all trauma and with all the different ways trauma can impact our world and like our systems. And Adrienne even mentions it, like the root cause of most of our systems out there is from trauma. And if we as a society can literally just walk away with that understanding and meet each other where we're at, I think that there will be laws made to support that. There will be systems set up as support throughout the process, right? And not just in a one and done situation, which a lot of things now exist as a band aid. And we need it to really take the band-aid away and get into where the root cause is, so then we can have more survivor stories. We can have more of a system that is supporting people who have gone through trauma, whether that be through domestic violence or otherwise, right? So just kind of hoping that at least we can get the conversation started, about this, and hopefully we can have and build off this film and beyond just those resources and conversations, and really get people to understand, right? Awareness is the first, and then second, really make and advocate for change, because I know that it's possible. And I just think if you don't know that the problem exists, or you don't understand why all these problems are happening over and over and over again, how are you going to ever do something about that? So that's what I
Right.
really hope for this
Or
film, at
even if
least.
we're in denial as a society and as a people,
Mhm.
how are we going to address that? We got to come out of that denial sometimes too.
Yeah.
That the fact that this is like I still see that to this day, which really amazes me that this is a private personal problem and
Mm.
not a societal one.
Yep.
Because that's what my abuse did back in the day. I was definitely like Adrian back in the day. The cops came and said, "Take a walk. This is a private matter. Cool your heads down, and everything will be okay." And some of that has shifted in a great way, but in other ways, it's still the same. So
Mhm.
until we come out of, I think, that denial factor as well,
Mhm. Mhm.
and projects like this help that. So yeah, that is just wonderful.
Yeah. If I could
So
tack on to what you're saying too, just
yeah,
to go even a step further, just in terms of utilizing the film as a tool, I'm really working to get it into first responders, into educational programs, into people that are the first on site in a domestic violence call. Because if those people can have the awareness and have the empathy and have the compassion and know what resources exist and know how to be of service, I think more people will come forward, more people will feel comfortable that they actually will receive help from the institutions that are supposed to be helping them. And then from there, I think it's a ripple effect.
Oh, oh, absolutely. And that's the next point we're kind of leading into that next point we're talking about is how can this kind of work help spread the use of our voices, right? How does this film challenge people to break that silence?
Yeah, I think definitely in first off, holding the space for yourself and those around you, being able to have those hard conversations and start the dialogue, but also like be at least understanding. And I think just having that awareness and that empathy and compassion really does make a difference. And if you have someone or you're experiencing it yourself, like being able to find spaces that you are supported, I think is huge. And I know that the world can change from just a small group of people. It really does just take, a couple people to do work and to create the space and capacity for change. And I think the more people that watch this film that get involved, whether that be by hosting a community screening or individually watching it, in your own home, whether that be organizations nationally, or locally incorporating this into their training programs, utilizing it as an awareness campaign, or just really leaning into and spreading the word about these empowering stories. I think that's where it's going to really make a difference. To get the word out about Adrienne, about Trish, about Maha, to showcase the tools and techniques that they utilized, and then from there, what can you do, what resources are available, and how can we support, and hopefully we have more organizations like yourself doing this incredible work and just being available, being open, being an open door.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's powerful. And so, like you just mentioned two other names. So, in Scars Unseen, there's other stories besides Adrian's in there, correct? So that people know that they're getting several powerful stories in this, right?
Yes, we focus on three leading ladies, Adrienne, Trish, and Maha, who have very different backgrounds and stories. And we go in detail to, how their history looked like, what they're doing now, and sort of anything that helped them along the way. And we have experts and different people who kind of provide an outside viewpoint as well. So hopefully we give you a whole top-down view, um, of domestic violence and trauma and healing from that trauma.
Yeah, wonderful. And Adrian, how did you feel like compared to before you did this project, and like how did it affect your healing doing this project in comparison?
I think that it really gave me a lot more empowerment.
Mhm.
We can have in our minds all we want, that this is physiologically appropriate, and of course I feel this way, and of course, um, I need to take responsibility for things that maybe weren't my responsibility or shouldn't be. However, when someone believes in us and starts telling our story and changing the story along with us, you feel less
Mhm.
alone. And you realize that there are people that are um, perpetuating a better way, a new way. And it still feels lonely, especially in the current climate that we're living in right now. And I think that there's also an aspect that I had to come to realize, that I could go to people for the rest of my life, for 1,000 years, and ask them to fix something. However, until they've either survived it themselves or know someone who has, they're never truly going to understand. Therefore, they will not be motivated to change things the way someone who has survived this has, or will be motivated, like yourself, Tara. Like
Mhm.
me, Meredith is such an open-minded, beautiful human who listens to people and empathizes and sees pain and understands it. And there is an element of losing our victimhood. There's a time and a place to be a victim, and there's a time and a place to demand that the people who are supposed to help us be trauma informed. And that's why I do strongly support Meredith in putting this into spaces like shelters, like police and fire,
Yes.
paramedics, teachers, professors, anyone in any position of leadership who manages any people, even one, and especially politicians. And because there is a time and a place when if you call yourself a leader, if you take on the mantle of being an authority figure / supporter of others, a therapist, nowadays, this information is out there. To me, that is their responsibility to begin to learn this.
Mm-hmm.
Our responsibility as survivors is, once we are able to stand on our feet and have a foundation, all that rage, we need to manage that and acknowledge it in healthy ways. There will be rage, and it will destroy you and those around you from the inside out if you do not address it. And we can stay angry for the rest of our lives. We can attend all the protests and scream until our voices are running out forever. And nervous systems are contagious, so what we're going to do is trigger everyone else around us and lose the respect because we're compromising our dignity. There's a time and a place for it, but it's not forever. And I think it's extremely important that our culture, our societies, our world starts to understand. I have worked as a therapist in the past in treatment centers directly with people coming from prison and probation. And I have to tell you, when you meet someone as a human with their anger and allow it to be without trying to stop it or stuff it or change it, there's something magical that happens when you're seen, when you're connected with, and that's the responsibility of leaders. And then the person's responsibility is to feel it, heal it, and then we have to come to a place where we balance as a society, that I can be angry still, and also I can become a part of the solution. I can feel my anger in private. I can feel my anger outside. I can run through my anger. I can exercise through my anger. I can talk through it. But there's a time and a place for that. And then there's a time and a place to acknowledge that I've also hurt others with my anger. I've made others afraid with my anger, because there's still not enough trauma-informed leaders in our world to be able to meet us where we're at. So I, as a survivor, whether it should be that way or not, need to rise up and start showing people what it looks like. So that's part of why this film, I think, is extremely powerful, and changing our stories and telling our stories in that different way, where we as survivors acknowledge that we are the best ones to do this work.
No, I absolutely agree. And I agree with your perspective on that with, our first responders, our politicians and everything. They see or think or feel one side, but if we come at them in a response of anger, they're not going to be open to hearing what we're trying to convey as to what we need. And so they're going to continue to function in a form of going to do what they think is best. And I have always found that through being able to tell my story in a way that I make people feel like this could be me, even if they haven't had that experience, that this could very well be me. This could be me and my daughter. This could be me in this situation. And this could be my sister. This could be, have them actually walk in your shoes, even for just that second through the story you're telling, and create that response, that emotional response. You're more apt to get the things you need and want, whether it's for yourself or for society, through laws, through critical change, because you've made it personal on that level. And until it's personal for those people, they're not going to respond in any kind of help.
Absolutely.
So I think that's critical for any kind of storytelling that we do, right? And I know, Meredith, that from talking to you here, that's kind of the aspect you took in your mindset, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think really just humanizing everyone is
Mhm.
kind of what I really like to focus on, because like Adrienne's saying, like we're all just humans. We're all operating from our own experience and everything, and meeting each other at different places, and like that's all part of the human experience. But I like you're saying, I think a lot of times it's easy for people to see this as a them issue, to see, and that goes for any issue, honestly, especially now. Any issue, if it's a them, it's a not me, that doesn't happen to me, that's not me. And I really believe that if it's happening to one of us, it's happening to all of us. So I think that just to have that awareness, like you're saying, and humanize and make it as personal as possible, and hopefully just give you some seed to relate to, or something, that draws you in, and builds that connection. I think Adrienne and Maha and Trisha's stories do an incredible job of doing that, because you can watch this and not have experienced it. Maybe this is your first introduction to this issue, or to trauma, and still walk away feeling empowered and feeling connected to these women and to their stories, in many different ways.
Incredible. So, wrapping up, I would love to hear from both of you. Like, how would you suggest somebody who's listening to us and they're thinking about sharing their story in some way, shape, or form, but they don't know how to get started? Where would you recommend them? What would you recommend them to do? How to get started? Adrienne first.
Sure. Well, again, the first step I truly firmly believe would be a deep soul searching of, are you ready?
Mhm.
Because there can be a time, like I said, if we're still deeply in our victim state, which is completely appropriate based on what we've been through, it might not be the time yet.
Mhm.
So once we have closed a portion, just a chapter of our book, because that's only one chapter, maybe it's time to write the next chapter with retelling our story. And I like to think of it that way. We can tell the story, but we can tell it in a way that begins to write the rest of our book. So if you're going to share your story, how do you want to look back and see yourself? Do you want to see yourself and tell a story of, poor me, I was horribly abused, and this was a terrible situation, and this abuser that, and this abuser this? Or do I want to think about, wow, I came from this, I met this person, this happened to me, and then I chose to live, and then I chose to get help, and then I chose to get help again when that helper didn't work out, and then I chose this strategy. And so I truly believe, and in the type of work I do, including when I was a therapist and now with my coaching and strategic planning, it is all about changing the narrative. That is the way science tells us, that we will heal. And if you've ever heard of the book The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, the neurological science is there, that when you read your story according to a victim space, you will trigger yourself times 10, versus telling your story in a way of empowerment. So I would encourage people to tell the story in the way that showcases yourself as the hero that you actually are, the courageous human who decided that your life and your children's lives, or whomever is affected, was valuable enough and worth living enough that you decided you wanted better. And then decide what you're going after. So, Tara, you mentioned, and this is actually part of the physiology of healing, emotion motivates with leadership. Emotional connection is what heals. So creating your own emotions around the future you want. I have my vision board here that I created back in 2018 when I first started this, and almost everything on there has happened. There's something that happens to you, and it's universal. It's a God thing, that when you have an emotional tie to your future goals, you will start seeking out, and these amazing coincidences, like what happened when I found Meredith, will start to happen.
Yes.
So when you tell the story, what are you hoping to gain from it? What kind of helpers are you hoping to gain? Who are you trying to help? So again, telling the story in a way that you see yourself differently, finding out or deciding who you want to be and what you want in your future, so your values, and then creating the emotional tie to who you wish your story would help. I would say those are the 3 steps I would suggest as a survivor.
Wonderful. And Meredith, you want to piggyback on that?
I love everything that Adrienne said, and I just want to echo the impact of like Adrienne was saying, the changing of your narrative. And I think that's really, really powerful no matter what you've been through or are currently going through. Like Adrienne saying, like having the ability to reclaim your story, to, ownership of who you are and what you've been through, and then what, like Adrienne's saying, and like change the narrative moving forward. And what does that look like? And that's going to be different for everyone, right? Like not everyone is going to want to be in a documentary, and
Yeah.
that's completely fine. Like
Yeah.
that whatever that looks like for you in that reclamation prospect moving forward, and those actions afterwards, and continuing, like we're saying, showing up, keep coming back again and again, like the waves, right? Like continue to be. And I think that'll look different for everyone, but I think that's the beauty of it too, is that it will look different for everyone, and to kind of embrace that, and find what works best for you.
Yes, absolutely. And just in case the listeners don't know this, but over on our website we do provide a platform where you could share your story with us, and you can keep it totally anonymous. So if you want to take advantage of that, definitely go over to our website at www.breakthesilencedv.org, and you could do it in a written form and just share your story with us. And like I said, it can be totally anonymous. And so a lot of people find that very healing, just to be able to do that, just to put it down like pen to paper kind of thing. And that may be all you need to do, is write it in a journal to yourself. And and you can find great healing in that as well. So I would encourage everybody to do that. So in closing, um, Meredith, if they want to see Scars Unseen, how do they do that?
Yeah, so Scarlet Unseen is available for community and individual screenings virtually, through the Kinema platform. And you can access that through our Scars Unseen website, just at scarsunseen.com. And we've got a whole list of resources on the website as well, with Adrienne's resources too, and different things that Adrienne offers and does as well. So check it out. And on social media, also Scars Unseen.
Wonderful. And we'll have that included into the descriptions and the comments and stuff, links for you to be able to do that. So you can find it there as well. And thank you, ladies, both for being here with us. So, concluding this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors, I want to take a moment definitely to thank the ladies for not just being here, but being so courageous and showing the world that survival isn't a straight line. Sometimes it's a story with jagged edges and painful truths, but there is incredible resilience as well. And the journey is worth it. So, here's some takeaways from today's conversation. Survivors are not just their trauma, they are artists and leaders and mothers and truth tellers, storytellers, and representation matters. Survivors control the narrative, healing becomes possible, not just for them, but for everyone watching. And finally, Scars Unseen isn't just a film, it's a call to action. So watch it, share it, let it challenge the way you see abuse and justice and healing. So, if this conversation moved you, it doesn't have to end there, of course. You can always donate to Hear It Break the Silence, where we continue telling the stories for survivors and funding programs that support healing and justice. And your support ensures that no survivor walks alone. Subscribe to Through the Eyes of Survivor. Make sure you click like, share, subscribe over in YouTube. We're going to have some great giveaways coming up in the next episodes coming up soon, but only through YouTube platform. So you have to go over there and be a subscriber over in YouTube for us. Also, Break the Silence has right now some incredible volunteer opportunities. So if you would love to volunteer with us, maybe just an hour a week, or a couple hours a month. um, Everything is remote here, so no matter where you are across the country, as long as you're in the continental United States, We have various volunteer openings, from content to our support line to helping to even be a moderator here on the podcast for us. If you would like to make that kind of a difference, we need people. So check us out on our website for that as well. And of course, just check out all our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all of that. And again, check out She Media and Scars Unseen. And we look forward to seeing you this next Wednesday, 5 p.m., our regular time. And we will have definitely some really good conversations for you on that next episode. And thank you for joining on this special uh, edition, day after Mother's Day edition. So until then, stay safe, stay strong, and continue to break your silence. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. My name is Tara Woodlee, and I am the president of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence, an organization that gives survivors and their families, and the families that have lost loved ones to domestic violence, access to a community that understands the journey that they're facing. We hope this episode impacts you, and hopefully you want to learn more about the topic. If it is helping you in some way, let us know in the comments below. We love your feedback. Also, make sure to click the subscribe button below and the bell right next to it so that you can get notified the next time an episode premieres. We hope you will see us in the next episode, and thank you. Thank you so much.